do you think people will be on the live because it's the Met Gala? And I said, I can guarantee you there's not a big crossover of the people that listen to Mosh. It's our IG Live and Mosh the Met Gala.
If not, if you're streaming us right now on YouTube, you can catch a corner of the screen here of the Met Gala. So there's that. So I'm trying to go live now. We're going live on Instagram. We're going live on YouTube. We're recording this for a podcast. So the computer Al here is working hard. You might be able to hear it.
Working hard. It is my goal for your birthday to get you a brand spanking new laptop that does not have the crazy. My computer, I can have all the tabs open.
Yeah.
I looked at the newer Pro.
Yeah, and no noise.
So we need that for you.
All right. Is somebody's asking what my Met Gala costume is? Yeah. Jared Leto took mine. He literally went as a cat. So the theme this year, Al, I'm adding as a moderator, by the way. Adding as a moderator there. Those of you watching on YouTube, we do this on Instagram right now, and I have a photo up of Jared Leto's cat costume. The theme this year, Karl Lagerfeld, and I guess he had a cat, Al. So some people,
famous cat.
I don't know much about his cat. He's a famous white cat. Yes. I try to track as much as I can in the news, and Karl Lagerfeld's cat.
It makes a lot of sense that you wouldn't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
You
but
know a lot about
Jared Leto knows. So Jared Leto is the cat.
Yeah.
Hold on. But this is him, like actually with the cat. Like this is how he showed up. With the cat mask. And then interestingly, but probably less surprisingly, who else went as a cat? Doja Cat. There she is. You probably weren't expecting this evening, but we're giving you a little Met Gala coverage because it's Monday. Oh, my mom says hello from Fort Worth. Welcome, Debbie from Fort Worth. This is her first time watching Monday night after they moved to Texas.
Hi, Debbie.
Hi, Debs. Anyway, so the annual Met Gala is happening just not that far, a couple miles away in Manhattan. And they have all the celebs, and they all wear these sort of costumes, and there's live coverage on E! And yada, yada, yada.
I'm excited for the after show. So our friend, John Passarella, who we followed for many years, who reports on like celebrity gossip, got the role as EP for E! News, and is like running the show there. I'm so happy for him, but I miss his coverage that I would get. We'd get emails.
Right. He was like what I try to do for news on Instagram. He did that via email every day. He had like the go-to JPass email, but he stopped doing that, right? When he went to E?
Yeah.
Got it.
But yeah, so he stopped doing that, which is sad for us.
Yeah.
But happy for E! And tonight they're doing a post show with like Andy Laventhal. She's like the director. She's like the style people. She's a big job at people.
Yeah.
She's hysterical. So I'm looking forward to her because a lot of the commentators right now.
You're not a fan of.
Oh my goodness, are they boring?
We'll let them know.
But Andy has opinions, and I like opinions. Okay, Mosh, are you ready to dive deep? What are we going to be hearing about tonight?
There's a lot. Yogi D is on from Bali, by the way. He might be our long distance guest of the night, Al, on the other side of Earth this evening.
Hi,
so
Yogi D. He says you look good on CNN.
Welcome, Dennis Hausworth. I'll be back on CNN allegedly tomorrow evening, 10 p.m. Eastern, on Tuesday night, pending breaking news, etc. So you can catch me there. Again, we'll see what topics they have. They always surprise us with topics, etc. Anyway, so we'll continue to monitor Met Gala coverage. Al's, we're on top of it. In the meantime, what else do we have? So
I'm going to put the link if people do not have cable.
On CNN. Okay, cool. First things first, we should say thanks to all of you for joining Mo News Premium. It's been an incredible week. This is where we announced it for the first time last week. You guys have been incredible in your outpouring of support, your generosity, etc. A number of you signed up for lifetime founding memberships, which is pretty awesome. Gotten people from the podcast, gotten people from the Instagram world, trying to share behind the scenes content as much as I can on the second Instagram feed. taking you behind the scenes into our process, into our lives, etc. Deep dives on various things, giving you kind of personal insights that I don't always share on the main account. You heard it here first. Al says I'm doing a great job.
And I'm the first to tell you.
That's also true. She is the first to tell me if I wasn't doing such a good job.
No, content, it's absolute content that if I was not your wife, I would want.
Cool.
And it's something you do not do on your main feed.
There we go.
You have a question for Letitia.
Okay.
How do we know if we have the other IG page?
Well, first of all, if you join as a member, you'll get a member page. It'll give you the handle, and then you go to Instagram and you follow that handle.
It's secret.
Well, we're just trying to make sure, because otherwise I got to let everyone in and I got to cross-check you against the membership or whatever. If you log into the website, you would have got an email. It might have gone to your spam folder when you first became a member on mo.news/premium, and you'll get an email, and it shows you how to get to the podcast. You pick either Apple or Spotify or podcast of choice for the premium podcast feed, and then it gives you the Instagram handle. You then request that, I then accept you, etc. If you're having any issues, send a direct message.
Yogi D says you are looking quite handsome and happy.
Thanks, Yogi D. Yogi D, I hope you're relaxed as we see in your Instagram feed, doing whatever it is that you're doing in Bali these days, my friend. But I appreciate your support.
So I apologize.
You were a little under the weather this weekend.
A little under the weather. Coughing and my breath. Okay.
Cool.
So we have today, what should people listening expect?
So first things first, earlier this afternoon, they announced there's a debt ceiling deadline, June 1st. So we'll break down what that means for all of us, including the government. It means Congress has a deadline. So Congress, get your act together. We can talk about Texas and the manhunt there. They don't have a lead right now for that shooting that happened outside of Houston. And then, there's some immigration news. Oh, many of you have been asking me recently about international travelers and when the requirement to not have a vaccine will be lifted. Turns out it's next Thursday, May 11th. Starting next Thursday, if you are coming into the U.S. from abroad, you are no longer mandated to show you had a vaccine. It's a little too late for Novak Djokovic, who, of course, couldn't compete recently because he still hadn't been vaccinated. There's still a requirement, but that is what we know there. So effectively, that means that May 11th, next Thursday, all of the COVID emergency is officially over from the past 3 years. So that's a headline today. Oh, sorry. Rather Be Dancing One says in the comments here that she caught COVID for the first time today. I'm sorry. I wish you a quick recovery.
Where the
Who, Rather Be Dancing One?
Yes.
Rather Be Dancing. I imagine your username has never been more relevant than having COVID. You would rather. So there we go. I see an immigration related question. I know it came up just now. She's in Texas, Al. So Claire will not comply. That is very adamant, Claire. Claire will not comply. Can we talk about press secretary claiming illegal immigration is down 90%? So let's talk about that for a second here. Karine Jean-Pierre immigration. So this is what she said. She believes that Biden's border policies have brought down illegal immigration more than 90% here. Hold on one second. Let me pull this up as we talk about this. So it depends, like most things, how you spin the numbers, right? Because you can count from different phases of a crisis, and percentages are relatively easy to find if you're looking for a percentage that is more advantageous to you. Now, we should say, as a matter of fact, that illegal immigration or migrants or undocumented migrants is the terminology who've been coming over the border. Those numbers are up over the last couple of years during the Biden administration. That coincides with a few different things. Some related to policy, Some related to the fact that he took over after COVID, after the world was locked down. So there were a lot of people itching to move. It also happens to be, and I'll lay out all the statistics here, after several major hurricanes hit Central America. So you had major issues there, on top of bad governments there, on top of people just trying to get out, on top of people who were locked in basically for a couple of years, who are making the move. At the same time, they're like, well, Biden, he's going to be much softer than Trump, right? His rhetoric is softer, etc. So let's make the move. Keep in mind, on our southern border, the vast majority of people coming across are not coming from Mexico, or not Mexican, I should say. They're coming through Mexico from other places: Venezuela, Haiti, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, all these varying places for a variety of reasons. You even see people coming in from Iran through Central America. There's an area called the Darien Gap that you can read about, you can watch about, that connects South America to Central America. And that's an area that people come through, and they're marching for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles, etc. And so we've seen massive numbers at the U.S. border. They've been trying to deal with stuff. Now, the Biden administration will tell you that part of the issue here was that they felt that the Trump administration left the systems in pretty bad shape. That's what they were saying initially. Well, it's now 2 years in. So what's their argument here? Well, incidentally, they've been cracking down in the past couple of months. There have been more criticism for the Biden immigration policies in some cases in recent months from the left than from the right, because right now Biden is about to put into effect several immigration policies that actually he criticized Trump for using, that he is now using, including how they're going to be interviewing migrants across the border, how they're holding people, etc., just because the numbers are massive. It comes, by the way, as you've seen a fight break out between northern cities and Texas. Texas keeps shipping migrants to various cities. The mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, not for long, but she's still mayor, sent a letter over the weekend to the governor of Texas saying, Governor Abbott, please stop sending your migrants to Chicago. And he's like, you're a sanctuary city. You guys shouldn't mind it. We're just giving them a ride. And so unfortunately, these people are basically a political ploy between Democrats and Republicans here. But he's saying El Paso's full, Texas is full. I'm going to send people to DC. I'm going to send people to Boston. I'm going to send people to New York, Chicago, San Francisco, etc. And so you've seen that, and that continues. And so he refuses to stop that. So that's what's going on there. But keep in mind, whenever you see a stat, it depends on how they're counting the statistic. I imagine the White House can defend that stat, because if you count a certain period of time, you could probably say that legal immigration is down over a certain time period if you pick the right number of weeks or months.
I think it is Klein, seek asylum in the first non-origin countries would go through.
Well, it's interesting you should mention that, because that's actually the policy that the Biden administration has instituted now, with criticism from progressives. We've now instituted a policy here in the U.S. that if you don't try to claim asylum in the countries that you walk through before you got to the U.S., you go to the back of the line. You get deported. That was a policy that Trump had, that Biden didn't have, and that Biden has now instituted. And this is one that Biden says is successful, or has been successful.
I don't think there's no question about this. Is there anything else you want to mention on that front?
No, I mean, it's an issue we're going to continue to monitor. Obviously, with Title 42, which was the COVID era policy, and we began this conversation by talking about COVID policies being over. Title 42 was the policy instituted in March of 2020 by Trump, extended by Biden as a public health measure, and it basically allowed the U.S. to deport 2.7 million migrants over the course of the past 3 years on public health, based on public health measures. Right? They're going to bring COVID over the border. Out. It's now over. Incidentally, it's funny, Republicans at the same time as they were arguing to end COVID measures, being like, this is crazy, they're like, no, can you keep this measure? Because this is like something we think is really important. Went all the way up through the courts. And ultimately here, Title 42 has been lifted, or is in the midst of being lifted. So we're going to see what happens starting next Thursday. And we're going to keep track of that.
Chris One says the progressives want fully open borders.
mean, I guess it depends on who you ask. I think that that's painted by the right. I don't think all progressives want truly open borders. Like, to be a country, you need to have borders. The question is how do you engage with those borders? How do you engage with immigration? We have an issue here, right? We have a worker shortage when it comes to certain jobs. There's certain jobs people don't want. And this has been the case going back decades. I mean, the entirety of the United States history is a story of immigration, right? Go back go back to the beginning. Go back to they wrote the Declaration of Independence. Actually, if you go to Berlin, which I've been to the museum there's a copy of the Declaration of Independence in German because we had a huge influx of German immigrants, right? We were Irish immigrants, we were German immigrants, we were Italian immigrants, Chinese immigrants, Jewish immigrants, Polish immigrants. It goes on and on and on. And every time a new group of migrants came in, they were the lowest of society. You can go to the Ellis Island Museum and you can see the posters that were put up of Italian and Irish immigrants and the slurs that were used about them. America, there's this famous Mark Twain quote that is that history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. And so I like it. Actually, who used it first with me was when we had Ken Burns, the documentarian, on for his Holocaust documentary back in September, which, by the way, you should listen to that podcast. That was a great conversation. This is the story of America. So, the most recent round of migrants comes from the South. If you go to the Central Valley of California, where the vast majority of our fruits and vegetables are grown for the entire country, who's doing the work? Laborers, migrants, not here legally. How are you getting your broccoli or straw? You don't think about that when you're in the grocery store, but you should. Now, not here to defend it. We certainly have a broken immigration policy, but at the same time, let's be straight with ourselves, right? We have certain jobs that need to be filled. We're a country of immigrants. Birth rate's going down. Our population continues to grow with our economy growing. The economy stops growing when the population stops growing. Look what's happening in Russia. Look what's happening across Europe. Look what's happening to China. China's freaking out about its population right now. Japan is going to go from 140 million people to 100 million people. There's abandoned schools and towns now because people just stopped having kids. And they don't have a very open immigration policy in Japan. So we need a fix. No one's saying the immigration policy in this country is good by any means. No, it hasn't been reformed for years. At the same time, I think both sides would argue that there needs to be some sort of compromise here to deal with the people who are already here and the people here who are potentially coming. How do you get the pain to the system? Look at the issue we're dealing with in France, right? We talk about this on the podcast and on lives a lot. Social Security in France, they're raising the retirement age from 62 to 64. They're rioting over that, by the way, from having to retire at 64 instead of 62. Okay, well, what's the issue? There's not enough workers paying into the system to pay for retirees. It's an issue we will soon be facing here because we have all these boomers retiring and not enough younger people. How do you deal with that? Well, one issue is figure out how to strategically bring in immigrants. Many of our biggest companies, founded by immigrants. Steve Jobs was the child of immigrants from the Middle East. I wouldn't be alive right now on my MacBook and my iPhone if it wasn't for an immigrant, right? For a variety of things. So, I think that we need to get our house in order. And I think that ultimately what we need is everything is so partisan. And this began with your question, do Democrats want an open border? You got to have closed border. You got to be a country. I think that rational, if you talk to Chuck Schumer, he doesn't say that. If you talk to Joe Biden, he doesn't say we want an open border. You need to have a policy. But you also have the policy for the people who are already here. And you have to have a policy for the people who are escaping gangs and rapists and a death sentence effectively in Central America. And so that's the challenge we face as a country that has always been open, sort of, to immigrants. We talked again about this on the Ken Burns podcast. I mean, even after the Holocaust and World War II, the U.S. still limited the number of Jews that would take into this country. I mean, you could go back into U.S. history, and we we'll take some, but especially since the 1920s, we've very much limited the number of immigrants we allow in every year.
Eric, Mosh is the best explanation of the border.
I try my best.
Also, hello. And then Danny she says great explanation. So she said this is fascinating.
Danny Lieberman.
Who's that?
Danny Clark. Danny Clark. Who who we go to for all things Toronto, Dallas, and Kansas City.
All over the map. All over the map. Hopefully she lands it. I know she won't.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Katie Van der Law says, here in rural Colorado, dairies and crop harvesting would collapse without immigration.
Yeah, I mean, this is a real issue, which is why it's so unfortunate this has become so partisan. The last time, I mean, I remember I was covering things in Washington during the Bush administration, and that was the last attempt to try to reform the immigration system. He was a Republican trying to work with Democrats for some compromise measure, but he was facing a lot of grief from within his own party, who wanted a much more hardline stance. And that was probably the last time that you saw any real movement towards immigration reform. You know, obviously, Obama tried to do stuff with the Dreamers, who are the children of migrants who are born in America, don't even speak the language of their parents, trying to go to college. And, you know, there was a threat, and it happened with some of them being deported. And again, they were born here. Their parents didn't come here legally. They were born here, raised here, educated here, going to college here, and they're going to be deported to a country they've never seen before. And that's unfortunately, that's again, like, how do you deal with the reality of that? What's fair there? What's right there? And so these are many of the questions that we need serious politicians to answer.
Alexi Shack says, I'm not sure how northern blue states, I live in Chicago, and ask southern states to not send migrants to them. Texas, Florida, etc. want the same thing as stronger immigration.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you have the governor of Texas saying this is not a Texas problem, this is an American problem, which is why he's busing the migrants north. Now, can it be done in a more organized way? Can it be done in a way like, hey, I'm sending these 100 migrants tomorrow, they'll arrive, whatever, as opposed to in the middle of the night for political purposes? This speaks to kind of our broken political system. I imagine there's a way to handle this in a much mature, responsible way that takes the interests of the country, the various states, and the migrants into, addressed. Oh, we love Randy Jaffe, the chiropractor.
While the girl says our au pair got married and it's been 2 years and they're still backed up, she still hasn't had her interview. I don't see how they're going to get through the migrants that are coming in illegally.
I mean, listen, there's a lot to deal with here. And again, it just takes some serious policymakers. So we'll see.
Your brother's on.
Hey, Chicago's on. We've got Fort Worth on. We've got Chicago on. We've got Bali on. Everybody's here.
Wow. Liz says both friends are affected. Immigrants may raise by 5 to 8 grand, all first-generation college grads.
Congratulations. You have very smart parents. All right. One other story. Should we move on from immigration here?
Yeah. This is a heavy subject. I feel like you should do it's heavy, but I know there's a lot of comments on it. I think this is a permanent post.
Should we look at should we look at Jared Leto as a cat again? Look at him. He wore a cat costume at the Met Gala, and this is him. This is him with the hat. This is him with the mask.
Michelle with the crazy light was on next to your face because she thought we were in Times Square. That was the Met Gala.
It's the Met Gala. Okay.
Okay. So Snow Wonder said, I think Al should be on a live with Mosh, and I
think so too. So just for background here for those listening,
yeah,
we've been doing lives on Instagram for 2 years now, a little more than 2 years. On Monday nights, every night, and we've been doing it where like I'm on camera and you're behind the scenes, and we're having conversation and you're curating, which she's totally cool with, folks.
I do understand.
Yeah.
Why people like it's annoying your brand voice. It's probably
who is this voice?
It's probably easier listening to the podcast without people on your.
It feels like a conversation. Yeah.
Listen to the podcast.
Yeah.
So your next week you're going to be away. I'll explain in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
But the week after, we will try that and see what it's annoying.
Like have us in boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll go away. I have
no. Why would you go away?
I have no skin in the game. So whatever everybody wants is cool with me.
So we're going to try it the week of May 15th.
Yeah.
Stay tuned, everybody, for the Alex on camera
6
appearance.
days for your birthday.
6 day, my birthday week. We're gonna try it.
You like went all the crazy when it's gonna be May. You love May.
Wait, can we talk about that for a second? I think it's our number one reel of no, not yet, but it's getting up there. Justin Timberlake. It's gonna be May. This one. Sorry, you thought you were gonna not have to deal with it. You're gonna have to deal with it. But hold on 1 second. Where is he? Where is my friend? When did I post it, Els? Oh, here we go. Are you ready?
You're obsessed.
I'm not obsessed. I just, I'm intrigued.
Every year, I'm so happy.
It's gonna be
All right. You get the point.
We get the point. Okay,
Yeah.
Mosh, where are you going next?
I'm going to Ethiopia, everybody. So we'll tell you guys because you're our close, you're our OGs. So I'm going to Ethiopia on a reporting trip. By the way, that Justin Timberlake video, we have 1.5 million views of it. You guys really like to share that, huh? So I'll be leaving this weekend on a trip to Ethiopia. What? What?
First of all, I'm sick right now.
Yeah. So this is Al's. I'm under the weather. You sound like Jill Zarin.
I am from Westchester County.
Yeah.
I'm not from Long Island.
Yeah.
But thank you, whoever that is.
Yeah. She's from Westchester,
I'm from Westchester.
north of New York City, not
there's
to the
no
east.
Problem. There's no problem.
There's no issue with Long Island.
Being from Long Island.
Yeah.
But I will say that some people mistake me from being from Long Island.
Got it.
Okay. So, sorry. Back to Ethiopia.
All right. So we're going to Ethiopia. I'll inform you guys more as we get closer to this, but basically I'll be covering a trip. There's several thousand Jewish descendants in Ethiopia that will be immigrating to Israel. So I've been invited to cover the trip. And so I'll be headed there to kind of rural Ethiopia as they airlift this group. And I'll let you guys know how it goes. But I'll be on it. So I'll be intermittent internet, etc.
It's funny. Dan Miller says, eat all the foods. And you were told to bring tons of granola bars.
Well, it depends on where we're at. S. Miller says, you're my Ed McMahon, Al. Do you get the reference?
Yeah, but I don't think she wants to see my face. I totally understand.
S. Miller.
I totally understand. She has opinions. She's always had opinions. She's always on the side and she has her own opinions and she's entitled to those things.
We're gonna experiment here. We're gonna try some stuff. So you will not have me next Monday night, but I'll be back the following Monday night.
Yeah.
So
I'm excited for this trip.
I am excited for the trip.
I'm excited for you.
Yeah.
It'll be awesome.
So we have that. What else do we want to talk about here?
Okay.
On the news feed? Yeah.
You had First Republic.
Yeah, let's talk about First Republic.
Okay.
All right, First Republic. First Republic Bank. I have the chart from earlier, I think. It finally, this has been kind of a slow motion thing we've been watching unfold now for a while. There's your chart of the largest bank failures in American history. Washington Mutual happened in 2008. And then number 2, number 3, and number 4 all happened in the last 2 months. First Republic actually took over Silicon Valley Bank as the second largest bank failure of all time. Then, so First Republic, Silicon Valley, and the Signature. And then IndyMac Colonial happened. One of those, again, happened in 2008 there. So First Republic got taken over by the government, sort of, and then sold to JP Morgan, which was already the largest bank and now is an even larger bank. First Republic dealt with some of the same issues that Silicon Valley Bank was dealing with. And now what's interesting is First Republic really focused. One of their focuses was like kind of high wealth clients that they would bring in, be assured of their deposits, and then they'd be able to upsell them on financial advising and that sort of thing. But what that did mean is they were passing out all these loans, et cetera, didn't have immediate liquidity. And because, which is an issue for a number of banks, but was a particular issue for First Republic here, is that they had a bunch of people with deposits way above many uninsured deposits, right? Because the FDIC insures people up to $250,000, and they had a number of businesses and high wealth clients who had much more than that in their bank accounts. So as people started to look around Silicon Valley Bank, they looked around and they're like, First Republic has a similar profile in some ways to Silicon Valley. So that then led to questions and then sort of this outflux of money from Silicon Valley, from First Republic Bank. Between January and March 31st, First Republic lost $100 billion in deposits. $100 billion was taken by people and transferred out of the system. So sort of a slow motion bank run, similar to the one that we saw bring down Silicon Valley Bank. Now, in the case of First Republic, they tried to save it. In fact, JP Morgan, you'll hear more about them in a second, they did lead a round to help try to save First Republic Bank with $30 billion last month. Turned out it wasn't enough. And so then First Republic was going around the past couple of weeks saying, hey, we need more, but it'll like totally be worth it for you guys. People weren't giving. And so by the end of last week, what was once a $150 stock earlier this year became a $2 and a few cents stock. Over the weekend, the government said, okay, that's it. We're done here. Let's put up the bank for auction. Final round, Bank of America, PNC, JP Morgan. They end up giving it to JP Morgan. And so that's where we find ourselves. Now, as far as your questions in regards to, is this a larger contagion? Well, as of what we've seen right now, it doesn't appear that there's an immediate fear of any other banks going this route. That what you had with that bank, I forget the Silver whatever bank, which was a crypto bank out of California, and Signature Bank were very into crypto. In the case of Silicon Valley Bank and First Republic Bank, you had a similar profile in terms of kind of high wealth, VC, etc. Those that made bets on interest rates staying low forever. And of course, we know that that's not the case. So they're all taking losses right now. And of course, when people want to take all their money out of the bank, banks aren't built like that, right? What's the famous Christmas movie, Al, where there's the bank run on Christmas Eve? And so Christmas Story. Was it Christmas Story? Hold on. I'll tell you. Christmas bank run. It's a Wonderful Life. Sorry, it's been a long weekend. It's a Wonderful Life. In It's Wonderful Life, there's a bank run. And it's like the way banks work is you put money in the bank. We use that to loan, money to other people, but we will have your money when you come. We're just not built to have you all come. All right, all of you see It's a Wonderful Life. We have very small. We have followers that have seen the classic movie It's a Wonderful Life. All of you, boom, 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 boom. So anyway,
I'm wholeheartedly disappointed. I have chased for living for, and we living with First Republic.
We do,
and it is the best. I have never experienced such an amazing team. And
it's nice to be with a smaller bank.
Oh, the app, it is just the most incredible situation. I'm very sad about it.
Yeah, I went over there initially. It was one of our friends was banking with them because it was good for small business.
Yeah.
So, it was regional bank. I mean, $200 billion regional bank, but the rest of these banks are $1 trillion banks. So, it is what it is, unfortunately. And Skyleader Mankides, taxpayers are paying for this. This is being good note, Al. Yeah.
Skyler said, aren't taxpayers paying for this bailout?
No. There's an insurance fund that all the banks pay into that's partially paying for this, but for the most part, JP Morgan just bought the assets here.
Jay says, how do credit unions compare?
Credit unions are run separately. They're not FDIC. I'll tell you. The credit union and also credit unions are limited in terms of how they invest your money. So you're much more safe with a credit union.
Altune Coldwell says, would it help if more people understood how bank goes in terms of deposits and available money?
Well, what's so interesting is some of the people that brought down these banks are very aware of how banks work. I mean, they run venture capital firms, etc. And with their app, they basically guided Silicon Valley Bank to a certain extent, First Republic. But at the same time, you understand why you have fear over, when you start to see headlines that your bank might not exist, you understand why a bank run happens. It just so happens that in this day and age, You're not required to go line up at the bank anymore. You have an app and you're just like, phew, and it can happen much quicker.
AP Governor says, are they going to be doing a bailout though for above 250K?
No, JP Morgan is covering all of it, insured and uninsured. So that's the 250K that's FDIC insured. JP Morgan is basically covering all of it, and they have a deal with the FDIC. Here, Ben is answering it on the stream to cover some of the balance sheet losses. Thank you, Benjamin, the pride of Connecticut.
Chris 325 says, have you talked about the new Apple savings accounts?
I have not, and frankly, I have to be honest with you, I have not looked into the Apple savings account, so I don't want to give you.
Do you want me to put it on your list?
We'll put it on the list.
Okay, I'll put it.
Yeah.
You hate when I put things on your list.
No, I like the list. There's a lot of news to get to.
Like your mother's list, you don't like that, the whole list.
Oh.
The home list.
Oh, the home chore list.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's my list, like.
Yeah.
Okay. Should we move on to a different subject?
Yeah, let's move on.
Turkey Winch says, RFK, does his campaign gain steam? My dad was picked up by RFK and his friend in the late 70s while further away to find drugs in NYC. We might be anti-vax, but not anti-drug.
All right. Turkey Winch has good stories about Bobby Kennedy Jr. So Bobby Kennedy Jr., one of the 11 kids of Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy, his father, younger brother of John F. Kennedy, also unfortunately assassinated. He was young. He was 42 years old. Al, he had 11 kids by the time he was 42. Robert F. Kennedy ran for president in 68, was assassinated in June of 68 in LA as he was making major progress towards winning the Democratic nomination that year, was anti-Vietnam. Incidentally, assassinated by a Palestinian who was upset about his stance on Israel, shot in a hotel kitchen. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., one of 11, and I went into the depth of the family and the cousins and the brothers and sisters and who they're all married to. He has a sister married to Andrew Cuomo, or did. Cousin Maria Shriver is married to Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's Caroline Kennedy, daughter of John F. Kennedy, currently ambassador to Australia after being ambassador to Japan. So they're the Kennedys, right? Several of them in the government, etc. His uncle Ted was Ted Kennedy, who passed away several years ago, was the last Kennedy to run against a sitting president. Kennedy tried to do that in 1980 against Jimmy Carter, who was not popular at the time. Jimmy Carter would go on to, win the nomination, but then lose to Ronald Reagan in 1980. So Bobby Kennedy Jr. effectively trying to do that to Joe Biden here. And you saw a Fox News poll, I put it up, that shows about 19% of Democrats support Bobby Kennedy Jr. Biden, of course, has 63% of support right now. Kennedy Jr., interesting in terms of political stances, not a conventional Democrat. Among the things, he's against the idea of, he also goes after this idea of wokeness, right? He thinks like a woman is a woman, so he's been kind of anti on trans stuff. Then he's an environmental attorney, so he's very into things on climate change, right? Very progressive on climate change. But then there's the vaccine stuff. And he's been for a very long time, had some very controversial stances in relation to vaccines and their impact. He was against the COVID vaccine. Funny enough, he's married to Cheryl Hines. Cheryl from Curb Your Enthusiasm. Incidentally, Larry David set them up. I'm throwing a lot of things at you guys here, but she was actually pro-vaccine, and they had a party during COVID, and they actually mandated everyone in the party had to have the vaccine against his will. And clearly, Cheryl runs the house over there.
Said, I found your coverage of the debacle over the interview to be fascinating. Different point of view. Very cool thing.
I try my best. It's one of those stories that I think says a lot. And it's not like a kind of top lead story of the day, but it's interesting, right? In terms of what happened there. So what we're referring to, for those who haven't been following, so Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announced his run for president a little over a week ago. Does an interview with ABC News. ABC News then proceeds to air it on Thursday night, would make a point of saying, we're airing the interview, but we're not going to include anything he said about vaccines because it's bunk, it's lies, and we're going to make a point of not even bothering to air it on ABC.
Yes, it says that Kennedy reminds her of Conor Roy.
Right now, based on Succession, he's polling better than Conor Roy, who says he's only getting 1%. But what do they share in common? They both have a family name with a lot of money and are running off that money and don't have a shot of being president. Bobby Kennedy Jr.? Oh, Max Ruck, the actor. I had the fortune of sitting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner a couple of years ago with Max Ruck. You might remember him from Ferris Bueller, or more recently from as Connor Roy on Succession. I like him. He's a very friendly, very smart guy, Max Ruck. So, big fan. We should have him on the podcast at some point. Him and I think it'd be fun.
Just want to make a note that Sky said that Bobby Kennedy.
Oh, Alan Ruck, not Max Ruck. Sorry.
Yeah, I know Ruck. Okay.
Yeah, it was Ruck.
So,
Alan, not Max.
This is what Sky said, that Kennedy is not anti-vax. He says it himself. He is anti-non-transparency in vaccines, and of course, he's anti-COVID vaccine, mostly because of the thoughts of transparency.
So he's anti some vaccines, but not anti all vaccines.
No, it's just that there are things that are controversial
Sure.
within vaccines that are not widely talked about.
At the same time, I would say that based on Bobby Kennedy's rhetoric, he's threading a needle there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, moving
on. Wait, but let's talk about ABC's decision.
Yeah.
So they aired this interview, and they're like, can't air the vaccine stuff. It's not truthful. Now, what I find interesting about that is they made a point for ABC, 1 point for transparency, saying this is why we cut something out. Questions for ABC in terms of, well, if you're going to cut that out, what else are you going to cut out? Every time a politician says something questionable, you're not going to air it. You're not going to challenge it. Someone who's running for president, you don't think the people deserve to hear what they have to say. Then they have the reporter challenge, being like, okay, Bobby Kennedy Jr., this is what we think about. This is what the American Medical Association says about what you have to say. This is what the American Pediatric Association has to say about what you say. This is what these studies have to say about what you say. Challenge the candidate. At the end of the day, if you're going to try to hold yourself to a standard where you cut out and you don't think the audience can deal with anything that's untruthful, well, that's going to be very hard for you to maintain as a network. You're going to have to be vetting and fact checking every single thing every politician says all the time in every interview. It's the top. That goes to the top. That goes to the executives of the network. Now, my theory of the case, again, this is just a theory, is maybe the pushback in the interview wasn't great. Maybe when they did the interview, they didn't feel that they effectively challenged Kennedy on the issue, and so they decided instead to just cut the section out. That's what I think. Because you go in and you're like, Kennedy stands for a few things, and among them is the stance on vaccines. You should be prepared on that stuff. At least that's my sense. That's my sense of it.
If you were at the top, then what would you do?
Well, I have not been able to see the raw video of the interview, so I don't know what took place, what was exchanged, what he threw out there, how the reporter challenged or did not challenge him. But I would say that in this day and age, it feels very much like an antiquated decision of a bygone year of like, all right, America, like we here at the network have decided you can't see that. We live in a different era. It's 2023. There's social. I mean, he can go live. He can go live on Instagram just like I am right now and say whatever he's going to say. It's not like there's two networks anymore, to get your message out there.
Okay, Amy Nelson, age 5. Okay,
all right, let's move on.
Other post-Western independents are supporting, and then Arnold Aiden says Trump is running president in the next election.
All right, let's answer Aiden's question. Aiden's our 13-year-old nephew from Algonquin, Illinois, out there in the western suburbs. Trump is running for re-election. Trump is running for re-election. Like, he is the leading Republican candidate for president. And it's interesting because I will get notes from some of you being like, why are you covering him? These are mainly people who don't like Trump, right? I can't deal with him anymore. All right, well, you're going to have to deal with him because he's running for president. So this whole idea of ignoring, this kind of takes me back to the ABC Bobby Kennedy thing. You can't ignore stuff. You cover it. You throw it out there. Like, for us to just decide, like, no. He right now polls as leading candidate. Interestingly, he has ended his CNN boycott, Alex, and he's doing a town hall next week with Caitlin Collins on CNN primetime, which is a great get for her. and should make for a very interesting town hall meeting in New Hampshire, where they'll be asking him questions. And so that is the deal. He's running. You're probably going to see DeSantis get in the next 3 weeks. You're going to see Tim Scott, I think, is going to announce May 22nd, the senator from South Carolina. So there are going to be Republicans running against him. Will they defeat him? Unclear. And we'll see what happens. Then should he win the Republican primary, he'll, be likely Joe Biden, or in a very, very rare situation, Bobby Kennedy Jr., but probably not. And then we'll vote if you're 18 or above and you're registered to vote in November of 2022 for either, in all likelihood, an 82-year-old Joe Biden or a 78-year-old Donald Trump. Or, I mean, of course, you could vote for an independent or write in a candidate, but just saying those are the likely two main party nominees.
Julie said that she wanted to bring up Trump. We'll bring up Trump.
I don't think she'll bring up Don Lemon to Trump. Trump may bring up Don Lemon to her because, how does he not take a shot at CNN while he's on CNN? He's probably going to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. You still have a few more questions. Okay. Yeah. You get to hear him call CNN fake news network nonstop during the interview.
I'm sure they're going to be. I mean, listen. If I was producing that town hall, you're going to prepare yourself for various things. What if Trump does this? What if Trump says that? Well, then ultimately they need to have responses, or they need to be able to redirect him. So we'll see how that goes.
Chris says, what do you think of CNN data? Not a question, and the new
programming. Listen, I think at the end of the day, during the Trump era, it sort of became MSNBC and CNN felt pretty similar. And so here CNN's trying to take a different tack to the center here by having Trump on. Trump's certainly giving them time of day there. They are having more Republicans on. And so they've made a point here of trying to kind of reemerge as a nonpartisan network again when it comes to political coverage. And so, at the end of the day, that it's important to have a nonpartisan network for America. As far as ratings are concerned, that'll be a big question, right? When you look at the past 20 years of cable news ratings, networks have done the best, have gone partisan. Fox has been number one for 20 years, partisan, right? MSNBC has been number two, and sometimes beats Fox in certain hours when they went left. CNN started to edge that way in the past few years and is trying to recalibrate, and so we'll see what happens. The Don Lemon thing was sort of inevitable. I was telling people that, based on all the stories that were coming out, it was probably a matter of time. It probably happened quicker than many of us thought, though.
Why do you think CNN chose Caitlin Collins for this interview with Trump instead of someone like Anderson?
I mean, listen, part of the reason why certain people get certain things is they got it themselves, right? So I wasn't in the process. Maybe Caitlin, they've all been pitching Trump for this, and Trump said, okay, I'll do it if it's Caitlin. Maybe, Caitlin was cultivating a relationship here. I mean, there's a whole variety of things. Caitlin's certainly been elevated in recent years, right? In terms of getting an anchor of the morning show, et cetera. And she's been out there, getting a lot of exclusives as she's been filling in primetime there. So, I think that probably explains, it's a combination of things.
Have you really, speaking of polls, have you done a post about these polls? Who does them and who do they actually poll? I've never been polled. LOL.
So I actually did a whole podcast. It was in September with a guy named Anthony Salvanto. If you search it, Anthony Salvanto, Mo News Podcast, it's probably easy to come up there, or you just have to kind of flick the podcast back to, it was probably the second or third week of September. I think it's like why polling is like your mom's spaghetti, like your grandma's spaghetti. Okay. So the idea there is, and Salvanto runs polling at CBS, and they have a combination of ways online where they have 100,000 people registered online from a variety of backgrounds. So it's like you got to represent everybody, right? You need Asians, you need Black Americans, you need Latino Americans, you need young, you need old, you need people with a college degree, people without a college degree. You got to represent the nation. You got people in all regions. And so ultimately, they work with third-party polling firms, and you're actually able to get a very good sense of America from about 1,500 to 2,000 people, believe it or not, statistically speaking. And so why is polling like your grandma's spaghetti sauce? Because if the sauce is made right, if you poll it effectively, you taste. Pin the link to what?
That interview.
Oh, sure. Let me do that. Pin.
Sure.
I got it. Is if you make the soup right, if you poll effectively and you get a good cross section, when you taste it on one side of the bowl and the other side of the bowl, it'll taste the same. And so that's what polling is like, right? How do you get a representative sample of the nation? You'll see that I try to make a point when I put up polls to show what their margin of error was. So let's say there's a poll out and it shows Trump leading Biden 55 to 45. 55% say Trump, 45 say Biden. Margin of error plus or minus 5. Well, what does that mean? That actually means that the election could be a tie or it could be a blowout, right? 55-45 plus or minus 5. So plus or minus 5, it could be 50-50 or it could be 60-40. But the poll comes in at 55-45. So always look at that margin of error and say, how close could it be? So anything that's within the margin of error, even if it shows like one side has an edge, effectively even. Now, some stuff is way outside the margin of error. You're like, well, I don't believe any polls. I was like, well, 87% of Americans say, for example, they want background checks, universal background checks on guns, including private gun sales. I don't care what your margin of error is, plus or minus 10, 87%, like a vast majority of Americans want that, right? So that's the way to think about polling in that way. And so I'll typically only put up polls where I know the pollsters doing it or the companies that they do or the reputation. So the Wall Street Journal, does good polling. Fox does good polling. ABC does good polling. A lot of the major networks, they do good polling. Now, there are always outliers, which is why there's a website you can go to called realclearpolitics.com. And there they have polling averages, which is interesting. And so you can go over there and you can see the average. And so typically there's always going to be outliers. There's going to be bad polls. There's certainly bad polls. Well, let's talk about those polls. The national polls were right? Hillary won the popular vote. Now, in the case of the states, most of those key states were within the margin of error. So again, effectively, the polls in those key states were predicting a tie. And this is effectively what we had, right? Trump won by 70,000 votes in 4 states. Biden won by 80,000 votes in 4 states. Now, in both cases, the national polls were accurate. They showed a Biden and Clinton win. They both won the popular by a number of percent. Now, when it comes to the states, though, that's where the polling isn't as good. But unfortunately, that's where, because we have an electoral college system, that's where it matters. And so the polling is slightly off, again, by a couple of percent, but it still gives you an indication of where things are at, right? So anyway, just a thought.
Adding back this up, would you consider an offer? And Peace Joy says, the former TV producer, would you enjoy the town hall with Trump? It is likely to be a hotness. 2 different questions. You can answer them.
The answer to both is yes. I would love to moderate a debate between 2 presidential candidates. I've prepared moderators for debates.
Who? Tell us.
Well, so in 2008, I was part of the team that was helping Chris Wallace and the Fox News team prepare for presidential debates. In 2012, we had a CBS primary debate. In 2016, we had a CBS primary debate. And so in that room, you have to imagine what the candidates are saying, what they might, say, where you can make news, where you can get potential exchanges between candidates. So, it's a different story to have to deal with it. All the more power. We're trying to have Chris Wallace on the podcast sometime soon, who's a mentor of mine, my old boss, because of course he had the debate where they were yelling at each other. Al, remember that in 2020?
Yeah.
The yelling debate, and the next debate was canceled. And he tried his best. And knowing Chris, like he had a great debate prepared, but like Trump kept interrupting, and the whole thing was a debacle. It was crazy. Is if you go into the debate prep there, Chris Christie talks about this. Chris Christie and Giuliani were both preparing Trump, and Chris Christie said, "Trump, shut up and let Biden mumble and screw it up." And Giuliani is like, "You interrupt the hell out of him." And Trump went with Rudy's advice with a debate, which didn't necessarily play well.
I think you're extremely busy as it is, but I think you would be an excellent person in the room preparing a candidate.
Oh, a candidate.
Like
yeah. If I was to pick a side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You would really because you are this.
Well, I one of the things is like I can anticipate what types of questions you might get, right? Yeah. Which was the other scandal of last week, right? That Biden had a question prepared. His people prepared him for potential questions at the press conference, and he was holding the card and left it up. And a photographer took a picture of it. And people are like, "Did they leak the question to the president in advance?" And it turns out it was the press team anticipating potential questions based on what reporters were writing recently.
I think
unpin the link to the political polls. Okay. It's unpinned now.
and if someone
Cosmo E Girl says, "Don't pick a side" in the comments. Don't worry, I won't pick a side. I'll prep both sides.
Yeah. The Japanese says both sides. It's so like you actually could.
I'd be one of the first consultants in history to work for both the Democrats and Republicans.
No, that's like you absolutely couldn't. You wouldn't know what to do so.
Yeah, you got to pick a side.
But you would be better than that. Yeah. Sky says, I thought Miss Christie was going to run.
He's looking at running. He's looking at running right now. I mean, he ran in 2016. He wanted to be a part of the Trump team. They had a falling out. He then was doing debate prep for Trump in 2020. But he very much thinks Trump is done here, doesn't think he's good for the party, and is looking very seriously at running. Now, Chris Christie's issue, former New Jersey governor, happens to be on the more moderate side of the spectrum. Does that play in today's Republican Party, especially the primary voters who tend to be farther right?
Robert Dick, author, says, real question, do you vote? I've heard journalists don't.
Some don't. I have.
You don't.
I don't always. But that was partially because I was, for so many years, I was still an absentee voter in Illinois and getting the absentee ballot because I never bothered to register here.
Right, that's
yeah.
Right.
It wasn't for like journalistic ethical purposes.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, like as a journalist, you're partially in the profession because you want a better country and a better future. And you, of all people, are one of the most informed people in the country to vote. You should be very steeped in the issues. So, like, if you're a smart journalist and you're not voting on print, come on, guys, come on, stop it. Anyway, that's my.
Still can report just the facts.
You can report the facts. You can separate you personally and what your interest is from your reporting. You should be able to do that. Like the fact that, like, oh, if I vote for them, I'll be like. I don't care. I'll vote for what's in the best interest of the country, and then inevitably those politicians will disappoint me, and I'll vote for somebody else. Oh no! Somebody is talking that we have breaking news. Gordon Lightfoot has passed away. Longtime musician, 84 years old. That's sad. He recorded with a lot of people. Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash. I mean, he wrote a lot of songs. Rainy Day People. If You Could Read My Mind. That was one of his hits. You know, you like that song.
My mom loved that song.
Yeah, If You Could Read My Mind. That's a sweet song. Sorry. R.I.P. Gordon Lightfoot. That's a sad departure.
Okay. Can I read you a couple of the questions?
Sure.
We're now approaching.
We're approaching an hour into this whole shebang.
I would like to wish Patrick a happy birthday.
Oh, is it today?
I don't know that it's today, but I know that he celebrated this weekend by going to Janet Jackson in, where did he say, St. Louis?
St. Louis. Mike, what's your birthday?
He'll tell us.
Okay.
If he's still on and not with Jeff.
Got
Okay. Ready?
Yeah.
Let's see. Can we talk? Claire will not reply. Says, can we talk about the press secretary claiming illegal immigration is now 90%?
I think we talked about that earlier. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, Claire.
Yeah.
Okay, Magic. Here we go. Okay. Samantha Pajak says, can you cover a bit about No Labels trying to become a third political party?
Yeah, so No Labels is a movement that started about 20 years ago. Democrats and Republicans, they're trying to be like a more centrist organization. They've now started to register in various states to run candidates. For many years, they were just raising money to try to get through and like find, bipartisan solutions to issues like immigration, Social Security, and other issues. And so recently, though, they decided they've had it. And by the way, when we talk no labels, we're talking about Larry Hogan, former centrist Republican governor of Maryland. We're talking about Joe Lieberman. Remember him? Democrat from Connecticut. We're talking about Joe Manchin from West Virginia. So again, people who are willing to defy their party in order to find solutions in the middle. They want to start running candidates. There is a fear among some Democrats that if they run candidates, that they will take a percentage of the vote away from Democrats and basically put the Republican in office, because the feeling is there's some slightly more moderate centrists who vote for the Democrats, and that they would take away the vote, similar to like how Ralph Nader took a certain percentage of the vote away from Al Gore in 2000, leading to George W. Bush being elected. So we'll watch that.
Magic Mike said his birthday was Saturday.
Oh, Magic Mike shares a birthday with Jerry Seinfeld, April 29th. So Jerry 69 that day. There you go. The things I have to learn for the podcast. I like now, Alex, if you thought I was more, if you thought like my random factoids were intolerable before, you just, I'm intolerable, but kind of like, okay, like, no, but some days you're in the mood for it and some days you're kind of like.
No, I laughed like you can't remember what you ate for breakfast, but you can remember.
Oh, I can't remember a person's name. Like we go out with a friend and like we meet their spouse and I can't remember their name. I can be like, you know when Jerry Seinfeld's birthday is? April 29th.
Chris said, what's the current state of Twitter?
Oh, good question. Let's actually literally go on Twitter right now. And I'll tell you what the current state of Twitter is, because this is actually something. So I recorded a podcast today with Ben Smith. Ben was the founding editor-in-chief of BuzzFeed News, former Politico, went on to become a New York Times media columnist, now co-founded a new media startup called Semaphore and promoted their newsletters recently on the Instagram account. And we were talking about this, that like you could go on Twitter not so long ago, pre-Elon, and just like check it out. And the algorithm worked to like, okay, you could peruse it for 2 minutes. You knew exactly what was happening in the world. The biggest stories happening in the world. They did something. He messed with it. And now it's become like pretty useless. Like I'm on it right now and I might find something interesting, but as far as like a good sense of the world, like just a quick summary of what's happening, like the 5-6 most trending tweets, he played with it. And it's like really annoying. And I talked to this, a bunch of journalists. Personal feelings about Elon Musk notwithstanding, the thing used to be a useful tool and is now a less useful tool.
What did
and we agree that like Twitter isn't what it was. That like it's broken. They broke it, and like you could take your qualms of Twitter before it was too liberal. Oh, Elon?
Yeah.
He thought it was too liberal. But in the process, it's become like not functional. So return to what it is, try to equalize the politics on it, but no matter what, just fix Twitter because it's annoying and it's sad. And you guys all used to ask me, how do you get what you get? Twitter. Now it's like requiring a lot more labor to figure out what's happening. And I'm annoyed some days because like I'll miss a story and one of you will message me, thankfully, or I'll see it and I'm hours behind on certain stories because like Twitter broke. It sucks. It's really sad. It makes me sad.
So that review is going to be
Ben Smith will have on later this week on the pod. I don't know if you guys saw, we had Points Guy. We put it up for premium last week. Then
someone asked what points under
I used Points Al for an upcoming trip that we have.
Yeah.
And I used one of his pieces of advice, which is transfer your credit card Amex points. Those are your cleanest points. Like, first of all, what's best about them is you can transfer them to almost every airline. And so having that centralized card as opposed to just putting all your bet on one airline is a good bet. So he was talking about Chase Sapphire and Amex as like a good place to start if you're playing into the point game.
I also saw that asked GPT like how to use your points, how to transfer your points. Like,
yeah.
And it comes up with a whole how to use points applied from JFK to Japan or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And ChatGPT will literally give you directions on how to do that and how to do it best. Is that not insane?
ChatGPT is remarkable. Al, on tomorrow's podcast, Jill and I are talking about how there's a new AI function that can actually read your mind. I swear to God. They can do an MRI scan of your brain, and they can figure out, based on where your brain is and the pattern of your speech, what words or thoughts you're having. That's where we are. By the way, I want to note, we're also streaming this on YouTube right now, Al, and we're getting notes. We're getting comments on YouTube. Shane Hoffman was watching on YouTube. A little kooky. So very glad you've added YouTube watching option. It's much more user friendly than Instagram. So thanks for that, Debbie Ferris. We don't have questions yet from YouTube. We just have a couple comments, and they're manageable. But this is cool. We're trying to be on as many platforms as we can here. So here we go.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Nina wants you to, if you see a snake in Ethiopia, he wants you to take a picture of it and send it.
I will do that. I will not send it to Alex. I'll send it to you, Aiden. Al, do you want a picture of a snake from Ethiopia?
I don't know when they will see snakes, but here's hoping.
Yeah.
Okay, for Aiden, not for you.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep going on the questions here. Polish guy says, what do you make of Japan, India, and Russia dropping the US dollar?
Okay, so this is the thing that keeps coming up. They didn't drop the US dollar. They all have their own currencies. Okay. India has the rupee. Japan has the yen. China has its own currency. I think what you're getting at is the dollar is an international trading currency, right? And so one of the reasons why most international business is done in dollars is the same reason why most international business is done in English. It's become effectively the most popular way to do business, right? So English is the way you do business. You do it in that language. Now, of course, the French are not happy about that, but it is what it is. The American currency, stable. This is why the debt ceiling situation is so important. American government, the American currency, especially for the past 100 years, the most stable. It was for many years the British pound. Then it became the dollar. The Chinese, of course, are like, well, it's our time. And so we think people should use the Chinese currency, RMB. But there's no transparency in how the Chinese currency works. And that's a major concern across the world is it legit? What are we to believe here? So you may have seen some scary headlines about the dollar no longer being the main currency. It has to be replaced with something, folks. What's going to be replaced with? First of all, you had enough problems in Europe trying to create the euro. They're still, trying to make that happen. And for many years, we were concerned actually that the euro was going to replace the dollar. Well, it isn't, and it hasn't. So what would replace? So inevitably, when you ask the question, what's getting replaced? What's going to replace the dollar? What's going to replace it? Is it the Chinese currency? Not the way that they build it right now. Crypto? Not after what happened last year. What's your option? So that's a question I think everyone should ask when there's fear mongering, specifically among certain people online, being like, oh, the BRICS. Okay. At the end of the day, the Chinese are a rising economy, the second largest economy in the world. They are trying to build basically an alliance against the US, but they have certain things that hamper that. And one of them is that they are dependent on the US economy and the US consumer and the US market. So everyone take a chill pill on this one and understand that inevitably every currency's kind of reign as the number one global currency comes to an end, but we're not there anytime soon when it comes to the dollar. Somebody asked about, Snow Wonder here asked about digital currency. Digital dollar or digital world currency? You're talking about crypto? I mean, that's the thing is, again, it has to be backed by a country or some sort of system. So digital currency, it has to be the digital dollar or the digital RMB. But again, China has a lack of transparency. China has an issue with its economy that people don't necessarily trust, even countries that rhetorically are criticizing the U.S.
Okay. Anything else on that when you want?
That's all I got to say about that.
Okay. Gianna 7713 says, can you talk about Biden and his jokes on Saturday? I'm surprised he was on fire.
Biden, you want to play some of the jokes?
I think a lot of people here saw it. I mean, you couldn't, but
I'll play the beginning of it. We'll play the first 45 seconds.
Okay.
Are they? So you think they're watching everything that? They're picking up everything I'm putting down.
You or
other. Here we go. Here we go.
Not just because my good friend Jimmy Madison wrote it. You might think I don't like Rupert Murdoch. It's simply not true. How could I dislike a guy who makes me look like Harry Styles?
12 years older. Not bad.
I call it being seasoned. You say I'm ancient. I say I'm wise. You say I'm over the hill. Don Lemon would say that's a man in his prime.
There you go. So there's a bit of it. Put about 2.5 minute reel. Yanni says you're right, Al, that you're hardcore Mo newsies, so they've seen everything. So you watch that. Typically, White Houses, they could have the speech writing team work on that. They might hire an outside comedy writer, depending on the president, etc. Most of those jokes were well delivered. There's a couple where like Biden completely missed the punchline, the timing. I'd say having been to like 10 of these, Al, like Obama was probably the best. Like, I mean, he was just a good speech maker. So like his comedic timing was like really good. But you know, always the fun White House Correspondents' Dinner they have every year, where for about 15 minutes every year, the president becomes a stand-up comedian.
Yeah. Okay. Can you talk about the writers strike?
So we're actually going to find out in the next hour and a half about the writers' strike. It's supposed to happen tonight at midnight Eastern. This is out in Hollywood. The Writers Guild of America voted 98% to go on strike if no deal is reached before. Oh, sorry. It's going to be 3 a.m. Eastern, midnight Pacific tonight. And basically, this is the issue as it's laid out to me. So media and tech companies producing shows that use writers have seen a drop in their stock price. That has led to cost cutting, right, including layoffs. The writers, though, many of whom can't support themselves, are suffering from reduced job opportunities and a loss of some sources of income. So they want more money. At the same time, the main guys want to give less money. And that's the issue you're facing right now. And so you have the union, which is negotiating with what's called the Alliance of Motion Pictures and Television Producers. So you have the writers of the famous, all the TV shows that you might watch versus Amazon, Apple, CBS, Disney, NBC, Netflix, Paramount, Sony, and Warner Brothers. And this is where we're at. The last time we had a strike like this, it led more to issues with TV shows than movies, because movies have a much longer runway. And TV shows have been trying to prepare for this, and they might bring in some backup writers, etc. But we saw this, and one of the issues is that just the economics of the industry have changed in the past couple of years here, and there's a huge question as the profitability of streaming services. You've experienced as consumers, right? Remember when Netflix was like, we're never going to do commercials? Well, what have they recently introduced? Commercials. They need money. They've run out of growth. That crazy period we saw in the beginning of COVID where everyone signed up for streaming, well, that was it. How many people are left who don't have X, Y, or Z? And so the writers are like, we need better compensation. And the networks are like, well, we have less money for you. And that's sort of the issue that you're facing, kind of broad strokes without getting into specifics here. But you could have 20,000 workers on 600 different productions who would be out of work here. Keep in mind, there was a strike in 2007, which was 16 years ago, $2 billion in economic damage. There was something for a brief hiatus, but this union went on strike in 2007 for 100 days. So there you go. Al, we've been doing this for an hour and 20 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
The reason why I asked the question is because I'm sure a lot of people here also might have a similar question because they are hardcore newsies.
Yeah, so this has been a rough period for several news organizations, right? BuzzFeed dropped its entire news unit. Insider.com did cutbacks. Morning Brew did cutbacks. Now you have Vice about to file for bankruptcy. Vice a few years ago, Shane Smith, the founder, the big marketer, some would say bullshitter of Vice, got them to value it, at least he claimed, $5.7 billion. Now, I never bought that valuation. It turned out that Vice was also cooking the books. on the digital front. But Vice was the cutting edge of journalism. I will give them this. Their style of journalism, their rawness, getting out there. I mean, you remember like Vice was a hot thing to watch, or at least say you watched. I was led to believe that many people like would say like it was like, oh yeah, I love Vice. I remember even journalists, Al, that I would interview at CBS. It's like, what are you liking right now? They're like Vice. I was like, oh, what story do you like? And they couldn't name a story.
As someone who what really, and as a younger person, I guess, that was for me.
You were not a Vice person.
Maybe that like, if you are actually looking at it as a journalist, that was in the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
That was other people.
I was watching a lot of Vice, and I thought they did some really incredible stuff.
Oh,
and I thought they did some incredible stuff. I thought they were covering stuff kind of old school, raw, using the sound, not putting kind of like the normal Western legacy media lens on stuff. So Vice starts as a Canadian arts magazine and then blows up 10 years ago into like Vice News. And they have a channel, a cable channel, and a show on HBO that really gives them a name, and Vice.com and global bureaus. They almost got by Disney for $3 billion, Al, that ended up working out. And so I thought they had some good work. They won some awards, but ultimately, as many digital media companies have started here, they had trouble making money. They never made money. And you've seen this through a number of digital startups in recent years. And so this is sort of the state of play. And this is something, again, I talk about with Ben Smith in the podcast that'll be out later this week. What happened?
The people
who watch this will like this podcast. You'll love this podcast because we'll talk about the rise and fall of BuzzFeed, the rise and fall of Gawker, the rise and fall of Vice. What happened? And yet the New York Times is still around, and CBS is still around, and NBC is still around, and CNN is still around. But like we thought that like the new hip kids that were doing the digital media were going to take over the world. And they did for a brief second. And then there were issues. So we talked about why that might be. And I think you'll find that interesting. But it's unfortunate because, you want diversity in media, you want diversity in reporting, and unfortunately it appears, Vice is done at this point.
The people don't want you to leave until you talk about Succession.
I didn't watch this week. I'm a week behind everybody.
Oh my God, that's so sad.
I'm a week behind. I didn't watch Sunday night.
That's so sad.
So I got to watch it after this.
You were doing your podcast, so it's a lot of
podcast, and we launched Mo News Premium. And I thank all of you who joined Mo News Premium, mo.news/premium, $7 a month, $70 a year, which is 2 months free, or a lifetime membership, which I appreciate all of you. Surprising number of you who joined lifetime memberships. I'm grateful for all of you. Could we talk about last week's Succession? So I'm on the episode where they meet the Europeans, and Tom is like trying to find his own, and Greg Egg for the first time is like standing up for himself, and basically the brothers, make what they think is going to kill the deal, and it turns out it makes the deal better. That's where I'm at. I'm not on this week's episode where Kendall gives the speech or whatever. So anyway, YouTube channel, if you search Mo News, or I think it's youtube.com/Moshe News.
You go to Mosh's website, all of his social handles. Sorry, my voice, it's out now. But you can say what I'm trying to say.
I know exactly what you're trying to say. Save your voice, Al. Mo.news has a link to all my social channels, including the YouTube channel. So go check that out. Thank you, Sarah and the girlies, for your subscription to Mo News Premium, and all of you who've joined the Mo News team for the private Instagram account, podcast. We've got more coming, but very excited. Gotten some great feedback, and so grateful to all of you, because it really, we go through periods here where I was like doing this on the side, still doing this on the side, and need a way to make a living off of this. And slowly but surely,
you're working
figure this out.
People don't, and you wouldn't put this in the message, but it's true.
Yeah.
You do this as a hobby, okay? You make no money from this. Trying to do that.
Well, now we're trying to monetize with ads.
But like you work a full-time job.
Right. I was consulting and doing PR work full time. Still doing it.
So for you, for people to get this news from you, and just the fact I've heard what you do every day, like you need to be funded, because you can't possibly continue on living a life where you work
2 jobs. Yeah, that's true.
Because you don't have a life. Okay? You don't have a life, and I will say it as your wife. I adore you.
She's the best. I love you very much.
I support you no matter what you do.
Yeah.
But I want you to have at least an hour on the Sunday night watching session.
I know.
And right now,
we don't.
Have it.
Anyway.
Okay?
But
so
okay.
Thank you, everybody.
By the way, and thank you all for wishing Alex well. Hopefully, all your thoughts and prayers for her health. She'll get her voice back. She'll have it back in time for when we do this again in 2 weeks. You can listen. If you missed any of this, it'll be on the premium podcast tomorrow. And we have some other exciting podcasts coming to you. We have Points Guy on the main feed. We have some more stuff coming up on the premium feed this week. Got a lot happening. But appreciate all of you and you on YouTube for watching. And we'll see everyone soon. Bye, guys.